Okay, not yet.
No talking yet. Shh.
We okay. All right. We are live. All right, folks. If folks are joining in live, what's up? We're gonna get started. For folks watching afterwards, welcome. Um, let's get started. So, Carolyn, welcome. Thank you for being here so much.
Yeah.
Thanks for connecting again. To start, most folks don't know, or some folks may not know who you are. So let's just start with, who are you? First, how are you? Who are you? What do you do? And what's your answer around why you're in the work today? I feel like that answer changes, and maybe it's always the same, maybe it changes. But let's introduce folks a little bit to yourself.
Yeah. Well, I'm doing okay. For how am I? I'm doing good. Hak squal tanoyap, Carolyn Roberts, Quinnsna. Tanachta tela skohom, shokomeach, nakwakwa okameach, and shiaktin okameach. Chin Kunman Tomi. My heart is always full and thankful when I get to chat with you, Joe. I love the work that you do, and I love that we're connected in this way to be able to support the larger conversations that need to be happening within the education system. What do I do? I do lots and lots. I am a faculty lecturer up at Simon Fraser University here in Vancouver, Canada. I work with pre-service teachers, so all the teachers that are heading out into education. I work with them in their understanding of colonialism and Indigenous education. I'm also the Indigenous Pedagogies Teaching Fellow, which supports the faculty and the staff at in the Faculty of Education at Simon Fraser. Yeah, and then I do lots of different presentations for teachers, the principals and vice principals, and the superintendents association. Oh, that was a big word. Association, to help with them on this learning path and learning journey of how do we get to thinking about decolonizing our practice. And what I'm really thinking about more so lately is taking an anti-colonial lens rather than a decolonial lens of it. And that's taking in the bigger picture of why things are the way that they are. So yeah, and I'm working on my doctorate in decolonization, indigenous ed, and anti-racism. Just a couple of things on the go.
Mm, Beautiful. It's a whole lot of things. So putting all that together, when sometimes I ask this question around when things get hard, what do you draw upon your why, right? What's something you're drawn upon recently where it revisits your purpose, it gives you direction, what keeps you in the fight when it's hard?
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a good question. Um, So my why is always my children and my grandchildren. And this is what I talk about when I talk to new educators. The reason that I do this work isn't that the education system is going to change for my kids, because my kids are almost done. It's for my grandchildren and their children, in hopes that they will not have the same experience in education as we did, and that they'll be able to see themselves in education and then have more opportunities for being these brilliant indigenous human beings. So that's always my why.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So in this next question, a lot of times we normally connect about just the work and what's going on, but these last 1, 2, 3, let's hope it's not a fourth year, have been very different and mostly difficult. But what's your experience, your personal experience been in the work? Um, these last couple of years while we've been battling a pandemic and being online, being back in person, but still battling a pandemic. What's it been like for you?
Yeah. So working at the university, it brings to light so many inequities that are already there that make it challenging for non-white students to be in those places and what's afforded to them for education. And I really feel like the biggest struggle was trying to not only support my family and myself's well-being, but it's also supporting the well-being of all the different students that were coming in with legitimately like massive challenges, but they're still there trying to put in the work, to do the work, to get things done so that they can get their certificates and all those pieces. And it was, I think the biggest overall challenge was just trying to keep everybody together, and what are the allowances that we can show the humanity piece in the work that we do. Like when we hear the stories of students and what they're trying to deal with and cope with at home, like how are we human in this educational process that we can allow for, okay, so how do we support you? What can I do to support you? And then what are the supports that are there? And then all the different pieces that need to be in place in order for them to get resources. It makes everything tricky. So I think it brought to light a lot of inequities in our system, and it brought about some good conversations of how we start to change that thinking around that.
Appreciate that. And you kind of started talking a little bit about some struggles. Feel free to add to that if you like. But this next question is, what's been a struggle that you've seen during the pandemic education, distance learning, and then what's the highlight? Something that positively came out of it that either we did for a brief moment or we're still doing. That it is better for education.
Yeah. Well, I think so. The struggle with that is lots and lots of faculty within the university had no idea how to switch to online, and they would just record their PowerPoints and put it on and then expect the
Mhm.
students just to be able to get it without that human interaction. And I think that was the big piece. And what I'm enjoying now being back in the class together is feeling the energy of the room and understanding where they are, where my words land, right? Because I can talk and talk and talk, but if nobody's picking up on it, I can't tell on Zoom, right? So that's been a really tricky point of doing this work. Even though I love teaching in my pajamas, I'm still not gonna lie. I think that humanness again, right, is the struggle. But what I found with having to switch my teaching style online, which I said I would never do when they asked me to create an online course, and I said you can't do Indigenous ed online. It's just not possible. So don't ask. So having to be forced to do it, it really made me critical of, so who am I as an educator? How can I do this work in a relational way over Zoom and still create that community that is needed for Indigenous education, for that space to be able to be like we are a community, even though we're on the Brady Bunch boxes, right?
Mhm,
So I
mhm.
think that it allotted a lot of self reflection as an educator for myself.
Yeah, I appreciate that point around creating community. So I have a follow-up question about that. So I think about this a lot because we spent a couple of years on Zoom, right? And if you didn't want to be technical and just do PowerPoints, you started trying to figure out how do we make it feel right, and how do we make it, worthwhile to be in, right? And how do we make a quality, engaging space online? So my question is around that. Like, what's one thing, not all the things, but what's one thing that makes experience feel different, even though we're online, whether that's around community, creating community, or that's around actually engaging folks. What's something that one of your go-to things that you're like, oh, we got it has to have this if we're going to do something online.
Yeah, and it has to start and end in circle for me. So we're checking in. Everybody's checking in. We're all saying either how we're doing, what's our favorite ice cream, where's our favorite place to go, finding those threads of making connections with each other, and then the closing circle of what are you taking today of value from our conversations today, and
Okay.
and allowing for the space to conversations to happen, breakout rooms conversations to happen, so they feel connected. There was a lot of students that said online that their educators never brought them together, they never asked them any questions, they could sit there with their screen off and just not be there even, right? So but I encouraged them to be a part of the conversation and a part of the work.
Yeah, yeah, I hear that. I mean, in some ways, that's just like good teaching, right? You could just, even in person, just lecture, just say, read the book. Um, and especially on Zoom or online, you could easily just skip all those like connections and conversations and whatever. So I hear that. Everyone's got to be involved and be able to say something, right, to connect. Um, And I think that's something I'm thinking about too, as we're like still hopefully the last time in virtual, maybe this summer, as I think about this conference, third annual coming up. I was on the fence around like, do we do it in person or virtual or whatever? And I'm hoping obviously next year to be in person. So I'm still thinking, how do we make it great online? And my question is, as you think about preparing for this third annual conference, what are you excited about talking about, like content wise? Like what, whether those are questions that you want folks to think about or new ideas that you want to bring to them. What's your topic going to be about, and what are you looking forward to doing with folks this summer in the workshop?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, what I always get excited about when I talk to educators is I really get excited about pushing their thinking about what is education. I know that in British Columbia we're seen as like ahead of the game in some areas with Indigenous ed, more so than across Canada. So I really like to be able to push that envelope to say, okay, so the bar was really, really low on what Indigenous education is and what we know in our history. So then, how are we going to push that bar and then push ourselves? So I like to give them little nuggets of information for them to what my elder was saying is like, oh, like I took that piece with me today and it's not really sitting well with me today. So I'm going to take it home and I'm going to chew on it and chew on it some more. Then I'm going to digest it and then I'm going to think about it and then how am I going to present it? So that gets me excited as an educator, knowing that there's these little nuggets of information that people are going away with when we're talking about looking at more than one perspective in our education system, looking at outside of the Western colonial education system of how we've been taught and what we've been taught when we've only been taught about Western European anything in our school system. How do we get more perspectives in? How do we get more voices in those spaces so that our children can see themselves in those spaces so that they can see more than just one story being told?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I get excited about. And I don't remember what all the question was, but
That's all good. So hearing you say that made me think of another question. So in the last couple of years, right, folks have all of a sudden had some interest in decolonization, anti-racism, diversity, all these kinds of things, right? And I know you're someone who does presentations and works with all kind of groups of folks.
yeah.
What's a common misconception that you feel like you often encounter with folks? Like, oh, you're going to do this, and they think it's about this, but it's
Yeah.
really about this, right? When we're thinking about decolonization or supporting or empowering our Indigenous folks.
Right? And I just got this question today, so perfect timing.
Good,
It's
good, good.
so I'm going to come and talk to you and you're going to teach me about how to make a dream catcher, teach me about your culture so that I can then teach it to the students in my class. And I'm just like, what? No, that is not what I'm going to teach you how to do. What I am going to teach you to do is to think critically about what you're bringing into the classroom and how you're teaching and making sure you're teaching to every student in that classroom. There is at no point am I ever going to teach you about my culture so you can teach it to my children. That's not going to happen.
Mm. I love it. I love it. And I can make so many connections with how people um, trivialize or make our culture superficial, right? Or think that it is about some sort of a checkbox or something, a food, a holiday, and not, like you said, the connections, the curriculum, everything, right? Yeah, yeah. Love it. Love it.
Yeah.
Um,
Not a
uh,
checklist. It's not a checkbox. We don't just okay, Indigenous said we've got it today, so we're moving on to something else. It's not happening.
cool, cool. Well, for folks who are listening, just know Carolyn is going to be doing a workshop on Wednesday, June 22nd. So take a look out for that. Let's move to the next question. So this next question is, over here in the US, we've been having some hard times, always having some hard times, but most recently we've been having some serious mass shootings, mass violence, young people, people of color, children in schools. And I feel like these are times when it's easy to lose our way. It's easy to grow disillusioned. It's easy to be tired and exhausted, which is natural. But at some point, we got to figure out what we're drawing on to continue to move forward and do the work. So my question is, what's feeding your soul what feeds your soul, whether that is something you always go to or something that you know to go back to when you need it. What is that?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Always going back. So in this moment, as I try to work through, first of all, I try not to watch the news when I hear certain things, especially about shootings and about our grave sites that are being recovered here in Canada. Um, so what I do is I go back to in this moment, I'm creating my regalia for cultural work. So as I'm sewing and I'm putting the paddles on, I'm reconnecting with my ancestors and I'm sitting with them. They're sitting alongside me in this work, and feeling that is really comforting for me. And also spending time with elders and them to tell their stories and ask them questions. That just like is incredibly powerful to listen to those who have come before us and how they view the world and how they view the work is really critical in order to help understand how I view the work. And then some other things is that I get to be a part of a lot of cool things at SFU, and we are taking a whole group of faculty and staff on a canoe trip this Friday. So we're bringing the elders onto the canoe. We're bringing staff and faculty for us to be there and culturally be there in a good way to learn about the waterways, to learn about what this land is to the people of this land. So that also helps. And I think the other part of it is working alongside others with the same vision, your critical friend group. For me, it's my Indigenous friend group of strong, amazing, Indigenous, brilliant human beings so that we know that we're not alone in this work.
Mhm. Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, I feel like we could learn a lot here in the US around tapping into the community. I feel like we do it brief moments, but this idea of truly centering and learning from and connecting with, it's just a high bar. We
Yeah.
don't often do it. So I'm always inspired when I hear how some of you are doing it. Hope we are doing more of that. So as you talk a little bit about elders and the past, right? We'll shift to the future, right? So when we think about where education is headed, I feel like there's always a fear of where it could be headed, and then
Mm-hmm.
there's a hope, right? Of like where you hope it might be headed, right? I mean, 10, 20 years from now, there'll be some other people joining the fight, right? And what might the future hold for us? What do you hope the future holds for us?
What do I hope? What are my hopes and dreams? And I think that that's good to put out there, is to understand that that every time I step into a classroom and every time I come and I do some talks, is I'm hoping that people are taking these things away with them to think about, to be able to change their practice. My hope is that we can change the practice within the system so that it can be more inclusive and more holistic when we're talking about humans, and bring the humanity back in education. And I see that with our pre-service teachers before they go out, how excited they are, and how motivated they are for change, in contrast to sometimes when I go speak to educators who've been in the system for a long time, which they do sit in that fear, right? So my hope is that the more work that we do in teacher education, the more education will change for the outset, to see that there's more than one way. And I don't know how it is in the United States, but in grade 8 everybody reads The Outsiders. Here,
Mm-hmm.
I read The Outsiders in grade 8. All of my children have now read The Outsiders in grade 8. I was like, seriously, people, there's been other books written. I mean, The Outsiders was written in 1969. so so there's got to
Mm-hmm.
be other books out there. So my hope is, a, that we see that there's other books and greatness out there, and that we focus on the land that we're on, and we're not focused on the other histories of other lands, but what about this land and the people of this land? So that's my hope. And I think we'll get there. I think there's been movements and shifts as we go. I think that they're just small, and I'm hoping they'll get bigger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is the hope, and that's why we're in this, right?
Yep.
And I appreciate the piece around it's up for this next generation to take it to the next level, right? And
Yep.
and push it further than we could. All right. So as we close up, what do you have on the horizon? Where can people learn more about what you're doing? How can people stay in contact with you?
Yeah. So I have a website, carolynroberts.net. It gives you lots of great information about talks that I do, presentations that I do. Also, I have some more workshops coming up in the fall. Here in BC, we're doing lots of work to make mandatory Indigenous courses in our education system. So teachers need help and support in that. So I'm offering some workshops around that in the fall. I'm also presenting at the BC Principals and Vice Principals Association. They have a short course in July, so I'm working with them there. And also in our October Pro D, I'm going to present there as well. And then November is the BC Superintendents Association. I'll be on their panel there. And the most exciting thing that's coming up is on Monday, all of the Indigenous students who are graduating in Simon Fraser University, they're all coming together to have a celebration of their graduation, and I get to speak to all of them there, and that's like that fill my heart to know, like, and to see all their hard work paid off and
Yeah.
them graduating.
Amazing. Yeah. Yes, 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 yes. So definitely check out Carolyn's work. If you're in the area, check it out in person. If not, maybe you can get something virtually. I've appreciated connecting with you, starting in Vancouver area, and
Yeah.
now however else we can kind of stay connected. And yeah, your point around seeing our graduates, I love it. I remember my experience being a graduate and being able to connect people from my culture in celebration. But yeah, it's nothing like seeing folks, realize the dreams, whatever they may be. So love to hear that. Appreciate you being a part of the conference, being a part of a quick interview to check in with what you're doing. And yeah, wish you a lot of success and good luck to get through the last little bits. And hopefully you get some summer break after all this too.
Yeah. For sure. Thanks. It's always great to connect, Joe. Thanks for coming out to say hello.
Yeah, thanks for the interview. All right, folks, we're going to end the live stream. Be well.